A day filled with so much excitement and anticipation ends with not many West Virginia fans feeling really any hope. The Mountaineers lose to UMass on the road in the Basketball Hall of Fame Classic, 87-79, now 4-6 on the year. And they do get some players back, still not Battle, as that's part of that hope dangling and teasing Mountaineer Nation, as he did not play, not due to any eligibility issues, and supposed to now be back for Wednesday with West Virginia's next game on the schedule, but did not play in this one due to flu-like symptoms, due to an illness. We'll get more into that and also unpacking this game, a tale of two halves yet again. And West Virginia certainly had their troubles, but almost came back to win it at the end. And a win would have basically at least allowed a positive vibe to exist. That's not the case, though. The Mountaineers do lose. They do lose again. And this is Mike Asti with our WVU basketball postgame show here on WV Sports Now. Our game recap is over there at WVSN, and that is actually Ethan Bock's game recap, as we have him on location at the Basketball Hall of Fame Classic. He traveled up north for this game, thinking maybe he was going to get to speak to Battle for the first time, thinking maybe he would return. He didn't even actually make the trip with Ethan. Still maybe, okay, Kriisa you could talk to. Nope, none of that, with no players talking to anybody. And, well, what's there to talk about, I guess? At least nothing they want to be discussing, as they do lose this one 87-79. So, Ethan, what's your overall synopsis of this, especially the mood? Obviously, this isn't a home game, so it's hard to get the pulse of the fans for you outside of social media like the rest of us. But just the mood around the team, for them not to offer players, like I even was telling you, off the air, generally, if you make a trip as a reporter, whether it's pro or college, they at least throw you somebody out of respect. And the program definitely usually respects us, but they wanted to get out of there. The plane's about to take off. Eilert looked down in the dumps yet again. What's your instant takeaway before we fully get into this? And then what's the vibe of the team after this loss?
Yeah, it's a roller coaster of a day.
Going into the least, yeah.
Going into the day, I think everybody expected this to basically be almost a second first game. Just bringing back Kriisa, Battle, Farrakhan, and then giving a Cook more minutes too, and then you combine that with all the players that they've started with at the beginning of the season. So, and then Cook 20 minutes before tip off, you find out Battle has an illness, and then I learned that he did make the trip, but then he went home, so he wasn't here tonight.
Okay.
So then that was the start of the downward spiral.
That pops the balloon a little bit. Yeah. Like, even if they would have won this game, that does pop the balloon because fans just want to see him play a freaking game, and they got to wait a few more days again.
Yeah, so that started the downward spiral. West Virginia during the game just couldn't get anything going, except if it was Kerr, Kriisa, or Farrakhan, Slazinski in stretches. But even him at some points struggled to get much going consistently. But then finding out after the game, Josh Eilert brings up Jesse Edwards injured his wrist.
Right, and he's the only reason they have the 4 wins to this point, you could argue. Yeah. Nothing against Linsky and company, but he's been the best player. Yeah.
So really, nothing really went right for West Virginia today. Yeah. I mean, if you want to take positives out of it, obviously Kerr, Kriisa, Noah Farrakhan, those are two guards that can get you 15 points on any given night.
Yeah.
And you saw how more fast they play with Kriisa running the point compared to what they had with Kobe Johnson and Seth Wilson and other guards at the beginning of the season. So
I think even the passes, the dunk to a Cook, that pass, nobody else on the team could have made that pass. Like, right there is an example of he is actually a floor general who has a handle and can make a pass at an elite level. That didn't exist prior to this game. That exact play right there would not have been converted without him on the floor prior to this game. So that right there encompasses everything, but not enough, clearly.
Kerr knows exactly where guys are going to be on the floor.
Yeah.
He knows 2 passes ahead where guys are supposed to be. So every time UMass would score, he was yelling at Slazinski to hurry, inbound the ball quick, and then he'd throw it quarter of the way down the floor and get the offense rolling instead of just playing slow pace West Virginia basketball.
Ethan Bock here, Mike Asti. Basketball Hall of Fame Classic, not a good night for the Mountaineers as they fly home with their heads down yet again, unless they're trying to take the glass half full take, kind of a little bit what we're talking about here, that at least you got an elite level player on the floor that you didn't have prior. You get a couple quality players actually on the floor you didn't have prior. You want to add battle, but you do end up with 2 20-point scorers in this game, Ethan. That's not something that has been said at any other point this year. And they also get pretty deep into double-digit scoring with 4 different Mountaineers with at least 10 or more, and then it certainly fell off. And again, you lose this game. UMass, they were 5-2 entering this game, I believe. They didn't really play anybody, though. They hadn't played anybody in the top 100 of KenPom, so it wasn't like they had a schedule that was really worth anything. This, I guess, is their best quality win of the season, and it's still a depleted Mountaineer team. But I don't want to say optimism because a lot of fans still kind of don't expect much from this year, but it was kind of a game one vibe. Like there were people that follow this program and have for a long time that vocally said they hadn't been as excited for a game this whole season outside of this one, including the real game one when they knew those guys weren't going to be on the floor. So all of that does kind of get crushed knowing Battle isn't going to be out there. And while Eiler can say he's going to be out there Wednesday, I think Mountaineer Nation, us and media and everybody else kind of has probably the mentality of, until I see him on the floor, I'm not buying it, because who knows if this illness could creep up again, even though it's days from now. Now, talking about Kriisa again in particular, obviously this team had a slow start, even when he was scoring. There was a point in this game he had 14 points. He would finish with 20, so he did kind of taper off towards the end. But there was a point he had 14 points, and they were losing by double digits, and nobody else really had much of anything else. For you, is it that this team is just not good enough in general, even if you add him and even if you add Battle, that they're just bad in general and there's almost no hope at all for this year? Or is there a glimmer, because we've even seen championship teams, when they finally get on the floor together, take several weeks, if not several games, certainly a chunk of games, to find a chemistry, and that maybe that chemistry hasn't been found yet. Maybe they started finding it in the second half. Maybe they can build off of that. And maybe it's just the fact that you cannot add a new player, even if he's elite, to a team that hadn't played with him before. It's not like these guys have been together for years and then he sat out 9 and he's back. They hadn't played together. Is there any hope there that they just need to gel and find chemistry that is always said in basketball, no matter whether you have Hall of Famers, All-Stars, or whoever, or all hope is lost? And this is an example of, even if Kriisa has 20 points, they're still going to lose to a mid-major.
Yeah, the season's been weird just based off of, it seemed like the team started to find their identity in the last couple weeks, even if they were still losing the Pitt and St. John's.
Right.
It felt like there was a little bit more just an understanding of them knowing who they are. And now you factor in Kriisa, a Cook's getting more minutes, Farrakhan's now all of a sudden playing. He wasn't supposed to play this season. So now you got guys from all different places that played last season, and then you factor recruits like Ofri Neve, who played in Israel last year. So
that's what I mean, right? This would be a little different if they were together and then you go through a suspension versus guys that had never played together as a team.
Yeah, I think they would have gelled better if they were able to have this whole team on the actual first game of the season. It's almost like now I feel like they lost their team identity, and they're probably going to lose it even more when they actually get Raekwon Battle back.
I got to find it over again. Yeah, right.
It's weird because all the guys they're bringing back are talented. They're they're good players. They're better than the players that
They're better.
they started out with.
Right.
But now they're like 5-6 weeks behind on just having that team identity. Even if they've practiced the entire time together, they're just like you can tell that Kriisa plays way too fast compared to the rest of the players, and that's not a knock on him. It's more a knock on the guys playing slower.
Any belief they can catch up to him, or that's just not their style? And is there almost an argument that now we're kind of seeing, and obviously they would have needed time to gel and they would have needed time to build chemistry. And if you do it in week one, maybe you at least win this game because you're into more chemistry and maybe you don't lose the bye game. But at this point now, obviously these are better, more talented players. Once they're there, they're going to play. And while they were worrying about eligibility and lawyers and things like that, they don't want to screw Battle's future. It was eventually left up to the kid. He wants to play. This was the flu. So once he got past that, and certainly with Kriisa, his suspension being over, he wants to play. So they're going to play them all. That's now clear. But is there almost a sense of maybe they don't fit together, and maybe at the end of the day, even going back to months ago when they were added, that this just is not a basketball fit? Like, that's a phrase that's put out there a lot in the NBA, that, okay, these are a bunch of all-stars, but they're not a basketball fit. Is there a possibility that even regardless of everything else going on, that this is just not a basketball fit of a team and it just would never have worked?
Yeah, that's definitely a possibility. I thought I thought during the game you could identify players that knew how to play to his speed and actually benefited off of
Okay.
it. Like Noah Farrakhan, he needs to play fast. A Cook, even in stretches. It's weird that he's the one playing fast with Kriisa.
It was kind of, I thought he looked a lot better than I would have thought he would have looked, even at this point in the season, or only having been back a couple games. Yeah.
And one that surprised me, and this is a typical, it's a Bob Huggins recruit, Josiah Harris, is just, I was surprised how well him and Kriisa meshed. Kerr was able to find him in a corner a couple times, and he was knocking down the shots. So that was a player I was a little concerned about disappearing once all these guys came back. And the player that actually disappeared tonight was Kobe Johnson, only playing 16 minutes. So definitely some people are going to benefit off of Kerr playing fast, and others are going to fall back, I feel like.
Ethan Bock, Mike Asti here. The Mountaineers do lose it 87-79. They used to have a basketball Hall of Famer as their head coach. They don't anymore. The interim head coach Josh Eilert, as his Mountaineers are now struggling 4-6, and you gotta wonder, like, what can he possibly do as well? It's hard not to feel bad for the guy, because it does feel like the program's headed for a countrywide coaching search and a new face and name and future of the program that's probably not Josh Eilert and company. But it also feels like this season was doomed from the start, and it's still doomed, and who knows where it's going to go. Interesting, though, off of players that could benefit or not benefit from these new all-stars being added to the lineup, because one player that Eilert's talked about, I think, every single press conference, whether it before games, after games, in Wilson, that he wanted to see more from. And he literally basically said, I just want him to shoot more. Even if he misses them, I'd rather him be 0 for 6 than, be 0 for 1. He gets 6 points in this game. You could still argue more shooting should occur, but there were others that fell back that weren't him. Like, how would you evaluate the rest of the team being able to play with those stars? Because it obviously they led the way offensively, but the ones you haven't mentioned, how else could maybe they gel and be part of this team as they try to figure this freaking out? And then obviously Battle's added in as well.
Yeah, I think Seth Wilson, like we talked about earlier, I think Seth Wilson could be one of those guys that benefits off of Kriisa playing fast. It's pretty obvious that if there's any identity with this team, it's that Kriisa is going to have the ball in his hand.
Yeah.
Every single play, and that's not it's not that he's the go-to scorer per se. It's more so just having a facilitator, a guy that knows where everybody's going to be. His basketball IQ's off the charts, so he knows where Seth Wilson's going to be on the wing and on the perimeter. So I think Seth's going to benefit off of it. And yeah, Seth's in a weird spot because he needs to shoot more, but at the same time, he also needs to get out of his slump. And he was a perfect 2 for 2. And I think efficiency wise, that's what West Virginia needs out of him.
Yeah, to say the least, they definitely need more help. But outside of shooting and scoring, because 79 points is actually a higher output than they'd normally have been putting up this season. They do have 2 20-point scorers. They had 4 players in double digits. You're going to add battle to that. It appears that even though this was not a recipe for success and could certainly still be a problem the rest of the season with or without battle, that offensively might not actually be their issue. Their issues are rebounding, which was non-existent in this game. Offensive, defensive wise, they just could not hang on the glass. Dealing with a bigger team, they certainly had some problems. Couldn't deal with anything UMass was doing in the paint. And if they didn't have Kriisa in this game, they probably would have lost by 20 points, if not 30, because he was able to hit some outside perimeter shots, if not threes. Same thing to be said with Slinsky, and able to add points when otherwise the possession would be dead and kind of make up for what UMass was doing so successfully in the paint. How does West Virginia move on from there in the regard of size, rebounding, etc., especially if Edwards would miss time? Because that's something that Battle's not exactly going to fix. Kriisa's not going to fix that. They could add 20 more points from Battle in this game, and maybe then you would win just off of offense. But you can't expect Kriisa and Battle to both get 20 plus every single night to even have a chance. And you also cannot lose a rebounding battle, 44-23, offensive rebounds 12-6. You also lose in steals, you lose in blocks. I mean, you lose all of those battles. I don't think offense is even going to matter.
Yeah, even the thing with West Virginia, all their ineligible players except the Cook, is that they're all guards. They're all combo guards, shooting guards, scoring guards, whatever you want to classify Battle and Farrakhan as. But
yeah,
they still have issues. They still have issues down in the paint with depth. I mean, once Edwards still needs to play conservative because all you have left is Slazinski and a Cook, and then a couple minutes out of Pat Sumanek. So it's going to be tough for this team either way going forward, with or without Edwards.
And without Edwards, it almost feels like you don't even have a chance rebounding wise in any physicality with any bigger team. But Edwards does have to play conservative like he even was before, maybe a little bit less now because of the offense fire punch being there. But if he's out, they're done. And he only put up 2 points in this game with a few rebounds, but obviously dealing with the injury to the wrist that Eiler was talking about. Anything else that you've heard, and I know players didn't speak to the media, but just being out there, being around the team, even talking to Eiler about the Battle situation and when they knew he was not going to play in this game, why they're so confident he will play against Radford, and what all happened there? Because 24 hours ago, Eiler was talking about how he wanted to double check with lawyers, but was really happy for the kid to at least have the TRO and be eligible during that time. The NCAA tries to threaten and say, you can't play then because then you'll lose eligibility. I don't know if someone called them and said, hey, that doesn't make any sense to what a TRO is, because in order to have a temporary restraining order, you can't punish for what goes on during it, and you're against the judge's ruling. So they backed off of that. And then it was clear that he could play, and no matter what happened during these 2 weeks, even if he loses the next ruling, he would not lose eligibility. The program would not be punished. They were all in the clear, and they even released a statement saying that they talked to the kid and he wants to play and they're going to play him, basically. And then he doesn't play. So the common fan sitting there saying, what the hell? Obviously, it's not about eligibility, but can you make any sense of that, or is it just purely bad luck that's almost funny at this point?
It's purely bad luck, and it's funny at this point. I mean, at first, obviously, I think everybody thinks of, maybe Raekwon didn't want to jump the gun. Same with West Virginia. Maybe they want to think it over longer. about his eligibility, but there's no risk anymore. Like
Yeah,
you
the
said,
NCAA has
so
backed off.
yeah.
They backed off at least for these 2 weeks, right? Yeah.
So, Josh Eiler basically said he started feeling sick on Wednesday after his TRO hearing when he testified on the stand. So he thinks he ate something. He didn't practice Thursday, but then he practiced Friday.
Did anyone at the NCAA buy him a meal?
Yeah. He returned to practice Friday, and it seemed like everything was trending positively.
Okay.
Which I'm sure that's why they put out the press release on Friday.
Right.
And then today it went back down negatively, and he went home. So.
But they did put out the press release, and I understand why they wouldn't put this information out until they know for sure he's not playing. But for any fan out there, they did put out the press release knowing then that he had flu-like symptoms and maybe that could linger on. Like they had that in the back of their mind when they put that out.
Yeah. So Josh is confident he plays Wednesday. It doesn't. Okay. It sounds like it's just a flu. It sounds like it's literally just flu-like symptoms. It's with everything West Virginia's dealt with in 2023. Like you said, you can't. I'll believe it when I see it because even when they fight for him for months and he gets his eligibility after going to court, and he's basically the poster child of every single time transfer, and he still doesn't play. It's just bad luck at this point.
And any future multi-time transfer absolutely needs to thank him. And I think that's the kicker because we were all debating on whether he should play, whether the program should hold him back. Even when the program appeared to be in the clear, then you get into the NCAA kind of drops their bomb that, okay, we're not going to punish the program during the TRO, but the player can still lose eligibility. And obviously that then turned around because that's ridiculous. But that whole time, there was a debate on what you do. And then to get the press release where the program basically said, fans, calm down. It's up to the kid. It's not even up to us. And he wants to play. And he fully knows the NCAA could change their mind tomorrow. Even if it's illegal, they could change their mind. They're acting like a mafia. We're going to leave it up to him. And he wants to play. So once you got that press release, it almost was like everyone was able to sit there and say, regardless of our individual opinions, he's going to play, and if he plays and he ends up losing eligibility, he knows that going in, and he's making this decision. And it also appears like the NCAA is at least not going to F with him during the TRO because you can't. And then for him not to play, that's almost why it's funny because the debates were over and he still didn't play. And I do imagine that at least if they had a game tomorrow, though, I do wonder what would happen. I do wonder what would happen even if this game was on Monday. This is Saturday. They're going to play Wednesday. There's plenty of time if it's just flu-like symptoms. There's also plenty of time, Ethan, to have more drama with the NCAA. So I would imagine wouldn't be. But, I imagine he's clear there, but there's time.
Nothing shocks me anymore.
Nothing would shock anyone, no. Right? But I would assume he'd be able to at least practice with this team. And the reason why I asked that, number one, there were some comments dropped that, okay, if the regardless of all the problems and trying to gel together, if the Mountaineers had battle in this game, they would have at least crawled out with a victory. Number one, do you agree with that sentiment? And then number two, do you feel they're at least going to be able to be together enough to try to have some chemistry built prior to the Wednesday game so that it's not like this where they barely touch the floor together until tip-off of a game, and no matter who you are, you can't get together and build the chemistry yet? They will have some practice time to at least build that?
Yeah, I think even with battle, I think West Virginia still loses.
Okay.
I think Farrakhan kind of filled in that role of a second guard next to Kriisa.
Farrakhan had 15 so you figure he probably has less, and then battle makes up the rest, right?
Yeah. So in the UMass players were talking about it. They felt like they had everybody on their team had a career night. So they were feeling feeling on cloud nine.
Yeah.
It was it was amazing seeing just the fans here and the media, players, Frank Martin, just talk about how important this game was for their
I was going
program
to get to him. Yeah.
and about how for the first time in a while it felt like old UMass basketball. Um, and it just seemed like the perfect day to be a UMass basketball fan, to kind of get some relevancy back. So
Yeah.
it seemed like
National
this was
stage in their backyard, not even
yeah.
just a regular game. You have the Basketball Hall of Fame Classic attached to it. Right. Yeah.
It just seemed like it seemed like this couldn't be a day where they lose.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you do have those vibes, and as deep as they were in this game, 19, 18, 15, 13, 8, 8, in terms of their scoring, not one single player beat out two of the Mountaineers. That's what's crazy. Both the top two leading scorers in this game individually were both Mountaineers, but yeah, UMass was deep and they just dominated in the paint. And then it also generally, Ethan, when you have this issue, I mean, field goal shooting wise, percentage wise, was very similar, even though UMass did win 43 some to West Virginia's 40. But free throws, 25 for 32. West Virginia only 9 of 12. So throw the percentages out the window. They just took so many more and were able to hit so many more that right there could decide the difference of this game with or without battle. Like, they're able to get to the free throw line because you can't handle them in the paint, and any defense West Virginia tried to put forth was a foul. And if Battle's out there trying to defend with his size, he would have ended up fouling as well. The way this game was officiated, they were not going to allow hack a shack type of thing to be a scheme for the Mountaineers. And these guys hit free throws. So if you send them to the free throw line, you try to be physical with them in the paint, you're already smaller, then they hit the free throws, it probably wouldn't have mattered. What does this team need to do, though, overall? And we talked about it a bunch already, but what does this team need to do, not even just for Radford, but moving on the rest of the season, especially once you get into Big 12 play? What do you think is a reasonable expectation of this team? You have Radford, you have Toledo, but then you're going to get some problems with Ohio State, and then we're into Big 12 conference play, and people saying, oh, will the team finally get together by that point? Yeah, but you're playing ranked team after ranked team after ranked team, and the reason why they were a tournament team with under 20 wins last year is because even when you lose, you're losing to a ranked team, and the quality wins were there, but they're also were playing teams that offered a really quality strength of schedule. You got to win some of them, though. They won enough last year despite not being that great. This year, I'm not sure where those wins even come at all. And even if you do gel, they still might not be good enough because you're going to face the fourth best team in the country. 2 days later, you're going to face the 19th best, 11th best, second best. And that's just off current rankings. Take 3 days of a break, 18, 19, 6, that's top 25. And that's the next 10 games. There's only 3 or 4 of them that are not against ranked teams, and they're still better than you.
Yeah, this was another must-win scenario for West Virginia. They just needed to get something on the board, just be able to kind of build momentum for once. That's another thing with this season. They haven't been able to get on a win streak, even with playing mid-major, low-major programs.
And even the wins, they're barely winning. They're winning by
Yeah.
6, they're winning by 4. When they lose, they're losing by 8, 9, 10 plus. Obviously, you have the Pitt game where they ended up just getting blown out.
Yeah, it's looking like it's going to be a long year, and even with everybody that they're returning, it's hard to see how they can gel so quickly with all these transfers from everywhere, and they're talented transfers. Like they're really good individual players. I don't know how they're going to gel so quickly right when Big 12 play starts, and you're playing Kansas, Houston, Baylor, Texas, etc. It's now a 14-team deep league. Even the new schools they add, well, they could definitely beat West Virginia. So, it's looking like it could be a long year if they don't quickly figure this thing out and gel before Ohio State even.
And as we said all through last year, and I just kind of alluded to, unlike college football, where some can argue you kind of just want to win some games, even though that sometimes can still bite you. In college basketball, it was proven out last year that if you get enough victories and out of conference play, and then at least you hang with the conference opponents when your conference is so stacked like the Big 12. Even if you lose most of them, you can crawl in the tournament. West Virginia crawled in off of analytics, but the difference is they were able to get the out of conference victories, and you still got to figure there's a bar there. Like if last year's team had 13 wins, they wouldn't have been a tournament team with the exact same schedule. You got to get some of the wins, even if you move up in KenPom when you happen to lose a game based on how the computers work. And I just don't see enough of the wins being there. They're 4-6 right now. It seems like it's impossible to believe they're even going to get into double digits into victories. And then despite what the program usually offers as an historic program, I mean, that's not even NIT worthy. And I don't even know if anyone will even care to compete in it at that point, because maybe Ren Baker has his mind made up and the fans are seemingly already checked out. So this could get really, really bad. And unfortunately, which we opened the show with, there was optimism and then the balloon got popped. The fans thinking, okay, I can at least get excited by watching this team together. They didn't even get that because Battle's not there. And then I'm not sure they were that entertained by watching what was there, because they realized it's going to take a long time for this team to even gel. They don't have enough size, and there's just not enough time. It's almost like too little, too late once you kind of get everything together. Now, before we end this one and let you go to the hotel and then travel on back, there were some kind of cryptic messages thrown out there on social media by some members of the coaching staff. This is public. It's already out there. Obviously, we know the program went after some transfers they did not get commits from, hoping they could add them to this team in the spring to try to drag them maybe into at least the NIT or the NCAA tournament. And probably the coaching staff is thinking we would try to do something on even the recruiting end to impress enough to stay on, because they're kind of coaching for their jobs as well. What do you know on the recruiting front, if there's any other transfer hope for the spring, and what maybe the assistants are trying to kind of tease and allude to leading up into this game, separate from just getting players back that they were throwing up the memes and the wink winks about? Any thoughts there or inside tips you can offer?
Yeah, so I think the coaching staff's given up on trying to find a prep school kid or an international guy to bring in between the semesters. I think that's long gone now. But just like weird transfers like Naquan Tomlin from K-State, just guys that are entering the portal, and he's already committed to Memphis.
That's who I was
weekend.
alluding to. They didn't get right. Yeah.
Yeah, there's there will be certain random guys that haven't played. I could even see a couple of the multi-time transfers that are now eligible, maybe
Make you the program the face of the multi-time transfer.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
If they wanted to make a move in between semesters and be eligible, if they weren't happy at their program, now they have the opportunity. So,
right.
I think the big thing with West Virginia right now is just keeping an eye on a familiar face, and I don't know how it could possibly get done.
Right.
But potentially bringing back Omar Silvario, who the NCAA ended his eligibility in August, and he's been playing pro ball for the last 4 or 5 months.
Yeah, that's an extra little monkey wrench into things a little bit, right?
Normally. But when you think about it, like, yeah, once you play pro, you can't come back. But
generally, right?
Genuinely, but
right, and that's what we've always grown up with our whole lives. That once you go pro, that's it. That's why it's a decision. Right.
But after the TRO ruling on Wednesday, now you sit back and think about it. In the court's eyes, they unlawfully ended his eligibility because he was a multi-time transfer. So it could get.
He wouldn't be playing pro if they didn't do that. That's what his lawyers could argue.
Yes.
That's what WVU would argue.
Yes.
Correct.
So I'm sure compliance is working on if it's even possible, but
right.
But
is that something timeline wise that obviously the next hearing is the December 27th? Battle can play during this TRO now. No future issues based on what the NCAA has currently ruled as we're on the air right now. And I need to say that based on it changing every day. But on December 27th, if they pull the hammer down, then they can obviously appeal and do that. And we just have a never ending appeal cycle, but then he'd have to come off the floor. For you, do they need to have, with a player that's currently pro that they unlawfully ended his eligibility. Would they need to have that case put together by the 27th? Is that separate? Is that later? Is that even realistic that even if they have a case that it sounds like they should win, that they even have the time to do it before the end of the season? Because it took us several months to get to here. Several months from now would almost be the end of the year.
I think the TRO is going to get extended through the whole season, but obviously that needs to get passed still. But I think if they brought back, or if they try to bring back Savario, who was already
do they need to have him grouped up into this though? Like, do they need to have his name on it by the 27th?
They probably, I think they would have to do it separately, just because of,
you would think, because he's right. I would think him playing pro would be a little different right now.
Yeah,
even if he's there unlawfully.
But he could get grouped in with all the student athletes that are already in that.
Maybe.
So it could get interesting. The window, they would have to get him in before the spring semester started if he came back to college. So
right. And if I'm him, I'm not even so sure if I'm worried about it right now, because like, what are you coming back for? I mean, that's another thing about getting some of these victories, even if they would have looked bad and crawled through a win at the end, that is where you can start convincing and add some hope that, okay, this could mean something. They don't have any of these wins that they needed to have before you get into Big 12 play to make any of this matter. That's the issue, I think. That even if you would have won the bye game against Monmouth, like every game that if you lost, it would basically be all hope is lost. They have lost. And if any of those are wins, and even if you're 500, that's one thing. They're going to have Radford. They're going to have Toledo. You'd figure those are wins, but then it's going to be really, really rough, and you can't figure anything. Nothing's a guarantee.
You would figure, but like I've said all year, every win for West Virginia is a good win.
Yeah, 100%. So, even the Drexel game looked like they were going to lose that for a while. 100%. Yeah.
There's really only the Jacksonville State game is the only one that pops out to me that they controlled the whole game.
Right.
So, yeah, it's every one's a good win.
I even saw some Jacksonville State media talking after that game that they felt, obviously they had won other games and you're just judging off a competition, but they kind of knew they weren't going to win going into the game, but they kind of thought their team kind of played okay based on what they normally expect from their team against West Virginia, even though they didn't have control the entire way through. So there was like an optimistic Jacksonville State side, even though they lost handily. So it just, when it gets bad, it only gets worse for the Mountaineers this year, and who knows what will be come spring, and certainly the new year in conference play could get ugly, or maybe this will somehow be a Cinderella story, but they got to get together. They got to find chemistry, and you would expect battle on Wednesday. You would expect him to at least be able to practice with the team up until that game. You would expect it's all clear until another TRO type hearing, and then you would now expect that to get extended to at least have this group. But what do they get out of this group is a whole nother question that we'll have answers to moving forward. Whether they're good or bad for Mountaineer Nation will be a different story. Ethan, we appreciate the time. Obviously, your coverage is over there at WV Sports Now. The rest of the coverage will be coming to the site as well. So go get some sleep, enjoy the trip home, and let us know if you hear anything else, because you're the only one out there to hear it.
Well, yeah, you say get sleep, but it seems like you can't sleep on this beat.
Well, it does. Now. It does seem that way. Correct. Yes, it does. It does seem that way, that there is really no sleep covering West Virginia in general. But yeah, no, it's not conducive to sleep by any means. And usually around now is when breaking news hits. So unless he missed something during the show, then at least this was a Saturday night.
Yeah, it's Saturday. I was going to say it's a Saturday night.
Saturday night covering the Mountaineers is generally speaking breaking news. So yes, West Virginia lost this game, but us and media won because we didn't have breaking news.
Yep.
That's all I'll say. That's the W I'm taking right now, that we're going to go to bed without breaking news, and it could very well drop at 2 a.m, but it did not drop while we're on the air and at 11 p.m. like it's been. So that'll do it for this edition of our WVU basketball post-game show. Find the site, find the channel, and of course, as we've already announced on the site, we do have now a VIP offer with the Holler. It'll give you some inside tips, but also a lot more coming, a lot more to announce, a lot maybe of people that you follow and want to hear from that's not us. You'll be able to get to talk to, and not everybody will. So more of that on the site as well. But the Mountaineers lose this one 87-79, now 4-6 on the year. They get some pieces back, not all of them yet, but not enough yet. Or will it ever be enough for this season?